Hello, my name is Ben. I'm a follower of Jesus. I want to speak to you from the book of Job. The book of Job is considered by many to be such a sad book as to be read only when absolutely necessary. It does involve great sadness. It does involve a man who had many blessings, having them all taken away, in a level of tragedy that I hope that no one ever has to experience. However, there are gems of exhortation in the book of Job that have to be fished out, because otherwise this is a book of sadness with a happy ending. First of all, Job 1:1. There was a man in the land of Uz, whose name was Job, and that man was perfect and upright, and one that feared God and hated evil. Now, it goes on further to tell you all the good things he had and what his life was, but I don't want to emphasize that now or bring in the sadness of this book to this exhortation. Now, unbeknownst to Job, he is on the supernatural radar. He is being talked about by God. He is being talked about by Satan, because he has trusted God. Picking up again in verse 6. Now there was a day when the sons of God, in this case often refers to angels, so fallen and non-fallen angels, came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan came also among them, because he would be a fallen angel. And the Lord said unto Satan, Whence comest thou? And he said, From going to and fro on the earth, and walking up and down on it. And the Lord said unto Satan, Hast thou considered my servant Job, that there is none like him in all the earth, a perfect and upright man, one that feareth God and hates evil? So to pause right there, can you imagine that God is talking about his children, sometimes expressing how proud he is of them, in ways that we may not find out about until eternity? That God has said about Job, he's one of a kind. There's nobody like him. He's perfect. Now, perfect in the Old Testament sense is ceremonial perfection, which has to do with being on top of sacrifices regarding your sins and those in your family. Now, that has a different meaning in the New Covenant and the New Testament, but essentially it has to do with a great spiritual sensitivity about things that you know that have slipped into your life, or perhaps into your family's life, that you know God to be concerned about and you want to deal with proactively and immediately. It sounds a little religious in our terms, but it's a sign of great spiritual sensitivity and taking sin seriously. So that when he says he's an upright man, he's got a good reputation, he doesn't cheat people, he's honest, but he fears God and hates evil. Because he fears and respects God so much and hates evil so much, he doesn't even like the idea of an awkwardness of sin between him and God, an error which could be resolved by way of a sacrifice. Once again, they had a, what you call a pre-sacrificial system. The temple system had not been established. This is quite antiquated in terms of the point in history this is occurring. This is somewhere between the fall and the establishment of the kingdom, but way back in time. But he got that concern about whether his sin, since Christ hadn't come, he couldn't die on their behalf, so a sacrificial system was in place to act as a substitute and a foreshadowing of Jesus' sacrificial death. So he was walking in what understanding he had of being right with God. And that is what God is honoring. Satan answered him and said, "Does Job fear you for nothing? Haven't you made a hedge about him and about his house and about all he has on every side? So, doesn't he have a lot of reasons to honor you? Haven't you just taken perfect care of Job?" says the devil. "Haven't you given him everything? Well, of course then he loves you. Of course then he respects you and fears losing relationship with you. You've given him everything. He's never had any loss. And you've protected him. You've kept evil from him, from his body, from his house, and about all his family. And you blessed the work of his hands. You made him successful. And his substance is increased in the land." This is a famous local businessman by prehistory sort of terms. "But put forth thy hand now and touch all that he hath, and he will curse thee to thy face." Now let me clarify what the devil is saying to God regarding Job. Job does not really love you. Job loves the stuff you give him. If you take it away, he's going to hate you. Because people aren't good. There aren't any faithful people. There aren't any people that love you and respect you and love you for you, God. They love you when you give them stuff, and then they hate you when you take it away. And they're all like that. And Job's like that. You're foolish for trusting him. Is the essence of what the devil is trying to convince God of. And this is a very strange thing to have revealed to us, this secret conversation that went on between God and Satan regarding Job. God says, "This is an amazing man. He loves me. He's concerned about sin. He is ceremonially perfect. He's the best follower I have on this planet." Satan says he doesn't really love you. He loves your stuff. You take it away. You take away his health. You take away his money. He is going to show you how much he hates you. And the Lord said unto Satan, "Behold, all he hath, all he owns, is in your power. Only upon himself put not forth thine hand." So Satan went forth from the presence of the Lord. So this is a very odd little conversation. God makes a statement of truth, and God is always right. Satan contradicts him, and God enters into a wager with him. Fine, you can take away all his stuff except his life, and we'll see what happens. Now, once again, to leave out the sad parts of the story and emphasize some joyous aspects, I'm going to refrain from reading all of the sad parts. But essentially, all the good things that God had given him are taken from him, and then his physical health his body is afflicted to a great extent. All these things are taken from him. His friends assume he must have sinned, and then while he is suffering, emotionally, financially, physically, psychologically, wondering what has happened, his friends, and I want to say friends in the quotation sense, they surround him and begin to lecture him about what he's done wrong. Which is where that's what friends are for, right? You're at your lowest point, they're here to tell you it's all your fault. And you better, repent, because clearly it's all your fault. That's another wrinkle of the story that adds to the difficulty of it. God allowed this righteous man to have all this suffering and all this loss, and then to have all his friends accuse him of it being his fault. That is very hard. That's the opposite of friend. Sometimes when your friends are suffering, and you think you know the right thing to say, the most wise thing, the most friendly thing you can do is sit quietly with them. If you don't have anything to say about why did you cause this upon yourself, it might be the wisest thing to do to just not say anything. If you have no relevant exhortation to someone, a believer, at their lowest possible point. Maybe your own opinions about what's their fault should be kept to yourself. And finally, his wife is very hostile with him about this subject as well. In a sense, Satan was right except about the wrong person. His wife responds exactly the way that Satan thought Job would respond, which is, I will curse the one who used to provide me these good things now that we don't have them anymore, which she means toward Job. And so all these things are lost. Your friends turn against you. Your wife turns against you. And this is a horrible experience I don't wish on anyone, and I hope that no one has to experience. However, there are two things that need to be brought out that are encouraging about this story. First, it highlights the fact that God is omnipotent and Satan is limited. No matter how much the devil thinks he can do, he is under the authority of God and has a bunch of things that he considers to be wisdom and insight that are far inferior to God's insight and wisdom. And so, understand that your enemy that afflicts you, if you've been afflicted in that manner, doesn't know the whole picture and cannot overcome God, cannot outsmart God, cannot overcome God. And another time, when we talk about the crucifixion, you will see that the devil thinks he wins because he thinks he's smarter. He can't overcome the idea that he's limited. And he thinks he's won when Jesus is on the cross. And then, of course, he hasn't, because Jesus has sent himself in a weak form to be mistreated and put to death, which is something that the enemy could not anticipate. Which further reminds us that God is in control. God knows everything. And any adversary we have, all the way up to the main adversary, is not in control and is not understanding what's happening. Has a limited understanding, is not omnipotent, and cannot defeat God. So hold that thought. Secondly, and this to me is the most powerful thing that can be gleaned, is consider Job's perspective. Consider he has faithfully served God, loved God, has no idea what is being talked about behind his back in the heavenlies. And suddenly these terrible things begin to occur. And he's forced to re-examine his faith. He's forced to consider his life at its lowest point. What he does not know is that he has been singled out to reveal God's will, to show how good God is, how powerful God is, how weak the enemy is. His life has become a living diorama, a living story, where we can see that at the maximum degree to which the enemy could harm us, God is still in control. God still loves us. God can still restore everything we've lost, and more so. So, you and I have the opportunity, when we have Job-like experiences, and I reiterate for I think the third time, that I hope that no one experiences the extent of what Job experienced ever. It is a horrible tragedy, and it is up to God to determine, why these things happen. We can say, if we have had suffering come to us and God has allowed it to come to us, that God is still in control. And that just maybe we have been honorably suffering. Just maybe you've been allowed to suffer because God bragged about you. And because the enemy said, no, it's not true. Dave doesn't love you. Dave will curse your name if you take away all the blessings you give him. Because it's why are we allowed to see this glimpse? I believe it's because this occurs throughout history. That there are people that are faithful to God that are allowed to be experiencers of this kind of suffering because God is showing himself to be faithful and he is refining our faith. It's very hard to consider, but we must remember, even though the villain of this story is Satan, he is given permission. And God says, I believe in his own mind, here's my opportunity to show that there are people that are faithful and love me for me, which is a key desire of God's heart, to be loved for being God, not for what he gives us, not for all the prayers he answers, not for all the wounds he heals, but love God for being God. And that is what is proven about Job, is that he doesn't love God just because of all the blessings. He loves God because God is God. And so the exhortation, and I believe the glimmer of joy, is for those experiencing profound suffering and loss to say, what if God has allowed this because of how much I've loved him? What if God has allowed this because of how faithful I've been? What if this is a diorama which others will watch and learn from and be blessed from? What if I am a living parable which God is going to use to magnify his name? And wouldn't that be the only reasonable explanation for suffering at that level? Wouldn't that be the only suffering that made any sense? Is that God wanted to show forth his goodness through it. Hope that exhortation touches your hearts and your spirits. God bless you.